Look, I know how this is gonna sound, but I need you to hear me out, okay? I bought a haunted painting and nobody believes me. I've always been drawn to really weird and really macabre art. You know the kind I'm talking about. The kind that makes people uncomfortable when they walk past it, but yet you can't stop looking at it. That kind. I love it. And I love going to antique shops and garage sales and scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, just to try to find that new weird little piece that I can add to my collection. So about a month ago, I was scrolling through Facebook Marketplace and I saw a posting for an estate sale in the older part of the city. So there's got to be good stuff there. Man, I really wish I had never seen that post. It was a fairly large mansion. And one of those ones that is original to the city because it's way too big and there's way too much property. You would never be able to buy anything that large with that much area in the city anymore unless you were super ultra wealthy. Anyway, they had what seemed like everything that was inside this massive old mansion spread out in the front lawn, almost looking like a hoity-toity outdoor flea market. So I got to work digging through all this old junk. Racks of clothes, old Christmas stuff, old furniture that had seen better days. The usual estate sale mess. And that's when I spotted it. The painting, it was propped up against this old wooden chair back in the corner, and it was partially hidden by boxes full of old Christmas decorations. And it wasn't all that big, maybe 2 feet by 3 feet. It had this simple wooden frame around it that had seen better days, but man, there was something about it. It just grabbed me, It was an oil painting of a fancy Victorian era dining room. It had a long table that dominated the entire scene, and the table was set for dinner. It had fine china and crystal glasses that all caught the light from some unseen window. It was really detailed stuff, like you could reach out and touch the crystal glasses on the table. But here's the thing that made it interesting. There were no people in the painting. All the chairs were pushed back from the table, like everyone had just gotten up and left in the middle of eating, or like they all just vanished mid-bite. There was half-eaten food on the plates, and one glass was tipped over with the red wine spilling out of it. Pretty cool, right? The longer I looked, the more details I noticed. There was a door that stood slightly open in the background, but it was really open to nothing. It was just a jet black room. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper than they should be. And there was something about the perspective that just felt wrong. Like the room was slightly tilted, but only when you weren't looking at it directly. It was really weird. The old lady that was running the sale, man, she was so creepy. She scared the crap out of me. She snuck up behind me out of nowhere while I was looking at this painting. She told me that the painting had belonged to her aunt, who purchased it without ever seeing it, and then flew over to Europe to pick it up and bring it back for her collection. $30, she said. I hesitated. Wait, what? I was so confused. $30 for an oil painting that your aunt bought without ever seeing it, didn't have it shipped, but flew to Europe to bring it back. $30, she said, and practically pushed the painting at me. That probably should have been my first red flag. That and the fact that her hands were shaking as I gave her the cash. But I was too excited about this. I had just got this amazingly creepy painting with an awesome backstory for only $30. So I took it home and hung it up in my living room right away. I was so pumped. My roommate, Rachel, on the other hand, she was significantly less enthusiastic about it than I was, which I somewhat expected because she typically always hates it when I put up creepy stuff in our apartment in the common areas. She said it gave her the creeps and that she felt like she was being watched, which pissed me off a little bit because there wasn't even any people in the painting. If you don't like it, just say you don't like it. I just kind of laughed it off. That's what makes it interesting, right? It gives the place a creepy vibe. She just rolled her eyes and again just reminded me that it gave her the creeps. And that was the last normal conversation we had about that painting. That night, everything changed. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of glassware clanking together. And at first I thought Rachel was having a late night snack, but when I went to tell her to keep it down, there was no one there. The sound had stopped, so I figured I was just imagining it and I went back to bed. But as I passed by the painting, I noticed something was off. One of the chairs was pushed closer to the table. But how is that possible? I turned on the main light and just stared at it. And I mean, you guys, I studied this painting. When I was at that estate sale, I stared at this painting for an hour. I memorized every detail of it. And I was positive that chair had moved. But it was late, I was tired, I told myself I was being ridiculous, and it was just the shadows, right? They were just playing tricks on me. So I went back to sleep. And I slept like shit because I couldn't stop thinking about it. But I remembered that I had taken a picture of it to post on Instagram right after I hung it on the wall. So I did feel some sense of relief because at least I could settle this in the morning. So the next morning, I pulled out my phone to compare the photo to the painting, and I felt my stomach drop. That frickin' chair had definitely moved. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to notice. But when I showed it to Rachel, she didn't see it. She looked at the photo on my phone and looked at the painting and said they looked exactly the same. Like, what are you talking about? The chair is clearly not in the same spot. I didn't know what else to do, so I kind of just laughed it off and was like, yeah, you're probably right. I'm probably just crazy. But I'm positive that chair was not in the same place. And you guys, the next morning, I shit you not, that chair had moved again. It had moved closer to the table. I know what I was seeing and no one believed me. I became obsessed. I started documenting the changes every day. The chairs, all of them, started moving closer to the table. The spilled wine, it began to right itself, and the food on the plates gradually started to disappear bite by bite. But I was the only one who could see it. Rachel, her boyfriend Mike, all of our friends, they all said it looked the same to them. It looked the exact same as the day I brought it home. Like, this is nuts. I don't know what's happening. Am I actually starting to go crazy, for God's sakes? And that's when the shadows started to move. I noticed it first in the doorway at the back of the painting. The darkness there seemed to pulse like it was breathing. Sometimes, late at night, I would stare at the painting and I swear I could see something shifting in those shadows. Vague humanoid shapes that would retreat when I looked directly at them. And the dreams, they started a week later. In the dreams, I was sitting at the table, but from a different angle than the painting showed. The food in front of me smelled delicious, but it writhed and moved on my plate when I tried to eat it. And there were other people at the table, but I could never quite see their faces. They spoke in a whispered gibberish that made my skin crawl, and I always woke up the next morning with the taste of red wine in my mouth. Rachel started avoiding the living room altogether. She said she would get headaches when she was in there, but she was still insistent that it had nothing to do with the painting and that the painting still looked the same. And Mike, her boyfriend, he stopped coming over altogether, started making up excuses about having to work late. And late one night, a couple months after I brought the painting home, I was up in my room working on my laptop when I heard that familiar clanking of glassware. I knew Rachel wasn't home and I was the only one there. My stomach was in knots. I knew where it was coming from. So I made my way to the living room, and as soon as I entered, the sound stopped again, like usual. But this time when I looked up, the painting had changed dramatically. All the chairs were pushed in, and that wine glass was upright and full, and the plates were all full of fresh food, and there were people at the table. They were painted in the same detailed style as the rest of the scene. Victorian-era men and women in their finest dinner clothes. Their faces were all turned away from the viewer and focused on their meals. But as I watched, I was horrified when one of them slowly began to turn towards me. I ran to my room and locked the door, and then I spent the rest of the night huddled under my blankets like a child. And I sat there all night, listening to the sounds of a dinner party happening in my living room. Quiet conversations, gentle laughter, and even the clinking of glassware. What the hell is happening? The next morning, the painting was back to its original state. Empty chairs, spilled wine, and half-eaten food. I didn't know what else to do, so I tried to take it down, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the frame was fused to the wall somehow. Rachel thought I was having some kind of breakdown, so she started staying at Mike's place until I started seeing a therapist. I needed to get rid of this thing, but I didn't know what to do. No one would help me because no one believed me. They all thought I was crazy. I even went back to the house where I bought the damn thing to try to get some answers. But when I got there, the house was all boarded up. Windows were broken. It looked abandoned, and it looked like it had been abandoned for years. I was at my wit's end. I tried everything I could think of to destroy the painting. Fire wouldn't touch it, water beads right off of it, and I even took a hammer to it once, but the hammer just bounced off the canvas. It didn't even chip the paint. Rachel came home one day and found me sitting on the floor sobbing, surrounded by lighter fluid and matches. That's when she called my parents. They're coming tomorrow to help me move home for a while. They think I'm having some kind of mental health crisis. Maybe I am, but I know what I'm seeing. But the most terrifying thing happened in my last dream. I finally saw the faces of the people at the dinner table. They were all the same face, the old woman from the estate sale, but much younger. And none of them were eating the food. Arranged with precision on each of their plates was a photograph, recent photographs, of me, of Rachel, of Mike, of every one of my family and friends that had looked at that painting. And now there's an empty chair at the table that wasn't there before. It wasn't in the original painting, but it's there now. And it's pulled back from the table, waiting for someone to sit down. I think it's for me.